Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the recap of fourth round Tbilisi World Cup 2017 with me, International Master Sopiko Guramishvili. How are you all today? We have been through exciting 3 days, and as I've promised you that I would cover all rounds of World Cup, here I am again, despite the fact that my husband is out of the tournament, unfortunately. I know that I was always starting my show, keeping my fingers crossed for him and wishing him good luck, but unfortunately he's been knocked out by Vachier-Lagrave, and if you remember in the previous show I said that if Vasily is in good form and if he has a good day, then it doesn't matter who is sitting in front of him, he can beat anybody. And yeah, Anish lost the first classical game and the second one was drawn, so he was out of the tournament. We had lots of tie breaks today. I think that you were following it as well, and we have the results actually. Peter's Fiddler, he did beat the Buxianji in the tie breaks. First 25 games, he won both of them, and it was actually probably a bit surprising for the spectators, because we all know that Buxianji, he knocked out Carlsen and everybody had high hopes for him. But I have to say that Peter, Chess24 author, and we all love him very much and we respect him as a player as well. He is playing World Cup amazing. He has been world champion. I mean, he won the World Cup once. He's been in final last time in Baku, and now he's playing great again. Unfortunately, my countryman Badur Jabova was knocked out by Wesley So, and I think that was quite expected. He knocked out Nayer Evgeny. Dubov Daniel lost against Levon Aronian. That was also quite expected, I think. Ding Liren won against Wang Hao. Two Chinese players were playing against each other. Fedoseev won against Maxim Rothstein, and Vachier-Lagrave beat Grichuk, Alexander Grichuk, in a very, very tight match. There were lots of games, and in 5-minute blitz game, Vachier won one game and the next one was draw, so it was enough to go through the fifth round. We also have the pairing, who is playing who. Peter Fiddler is playing against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave. Ivanchuk is playing against Aronian, and So Wesley and Fedoseev are playing against each other, and Rapport is playing against Ding Liren. So it's going to be a really, really amazing and super tough fifth round, and we're looking forward to it. And let's start what I have prepared for you. There were, of course, many interesting games in the tie breaks, but as you know, I like to cover the classical games because I think that players really do their best in the classical match and really give their everything. And they have time to think, they have all factors to do their best, while in tie breaks it's a huge pressure. There is either now or never, and also there is the fact that you have less time. That's why I'm not a big fan of covering tie break games, but I did cover it in the round 2 and round 3 as well. But let's focus on the classical games, and I'd like to emphasize that I had one favorite game in the classical game, and sorry, it was not a win or loss against a win or loss of somebody, but it was actually a draw, and the draw was between Alexander Grichuk and Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, and I totally loved that game because it was not a dull draw, which we witnessed many times, but it was a very fighting chess, and you never knew who was better, who was lots of tactics, and I'm really looking forward to share these thoughts with you. Before I start, I have to remind you about the promotion of Chess24. You still have a chance to get 3 plus months if you have not picked your favorite player yet, and if you didn't send the name on support at chess24.com. So I'd like to remind you, how does it work? Look at this. You just buy an annual premium membership, then mail your tournament favorite name to support chess24.com and win a free month of premium for every round your player will advance. So you still have a chance, and go for it if you're not the premium member yet. All right. I am able to follow the chat, though sometimes I am so much into explaining you the ideas and everything that sometimes I'm like I don't follow the chat and I cannot read everything, but for sure, if you have any questions, any ideas, you have to write, and I'll try to follow it, and I'll try to answer your questions. All right, now I'd like you to write in chat that everything is fine, you hear me good, and the stream is okay, and then I'll start showing the games. Let Me Win is asking who is my favorite. Okay, now that Anish is out, I cannot say that I have any favorite in the tournament, because my favorite player is out of the tournament, but I have some predictions that I think that Aronian will be in final, and I guess that Maxim Vachier-Lagrave is also playing a very good chess, so I think that it will be the final of Maxim Vachier against Aronian. I think that's possible. Okay, so let's get started. I guess that everything is fine, you hear me good, and yeah, I read the stream is fine. So let's get started and pay attention to the games. Here we are. The first game, I mentioned that it was the game of Grichuk, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, who was with white pieces against Alexander Grichuk. And let's start from the beginning. It was the Italian. We've seen this opening very much, it's very much discussed on the top level nowadays. First it was bishop b5, sometimes open Spanish, then Berlin, then Ruy Lopez, but now bishop c4 is really, I think, the most popular move after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. And here on h3, very topical line, Grichuk played the move a5, and it is a bit strange for the first time to see that first black played a6 and then a5 was played. This was a novelty actually, which probably confused Maxim a bit. He said in the interview that he was surprised with Alexander's choice, but of course it has an idea, and the idea is that white does not have a useful move, useful developing move. Let's say, for example, instead of a5, bishop e6 is also very much played, and bishop e6, bishop e6, bishop e3 is the line. But after a5, you don't want to go bishop e3 without exchanging the bishops on e6. And Maxim played the very straightforward line move knight bd2, which means that after bishop e6, if bishop e6, f takes e6, there is no more bishop e3. So a5 is quite a smart move. I think it's just a waiting move. And here Maxim played bishop b5, knight a7. This is quite forced, because now after knight 7 there is no more bishop a4, so it means that the bishop is kind of lost. d4, and knight b5 was played in the game. But now let's see what is the difference actually between e takes d5 and c takes d4 and knight b5. Let's say if black took e takes d4 first, c takes d4, and knight b5, then it would not be that great, because after dc5, knight has to go back, c takes d6, and black is obliged to take back the d pawn with the pawn, because after queen d6, obviously it runs into e5. C takes d4 and knight c takes d6 and knight d4. This is just big advantage for white, because the pawn on d6 is very weak, and white's plan is very easy. Knight f3, develop the bishop, and have pressure on the d6 pawn. So e d4 is quite not a very nice move, because if you take and go bishop b4, then white saves the bishop with bishop d3 and has a very strong center. d4, e4 pawn, and the c file is open. Definitely it's an advantage for white. Thus, after d4, knight b5 was played, d takes c5, and knight a7 back. Here Maxim played a very natural looking move, b3. Using the fact that dc5 is not that great, because the pawn on e5 is hanging. So after b3, rook e8. The idea of rook e8 is that I might have in mind to take on c5, because after knight e5 I would have bishop h3. That's why rook e8, and that's why white took on d6 and queen d6. Queen d6 is, I think, very logical to take this pawn with the queen, because after cd6, c4, definitely I would not prefer to play this position with black, because the d6 pawn is weak. There is no more breakthrough with b5 or d5, and the usual plan of bishop a3, knight b1, knight c3 is very much possible. So after c takes d6, queen d6, bishop a3 was played, and queen a6. And as I saw in the interview, Maxim said that yeah, this queen is not that great, is a bit misplaced on a6. That's why another option was to play c5 here. But of course you have to have courage to play this move, because first of all, it might always go under b4 if we prepare it very well, and simple rook, queen e2, b6, rook d1, rook d8 is a very, very double-edged, unclear position. But the idea of c5 is actually to stop b4 for the moment, because after bishop a3, queen a6, there was a very interesting move played b4. Now let's see why knight e5 was not good. Knight e5, here black has two options, to take on h3 and to take on b3. Actually, bishop b3 would be bad to take, because after queen b3, rook e5, f4, rook e8, e5, and knight e4, white gains a lot of space in the center, and we have bishop and knight versus two knights, and these two knights are quite passive. First of all, we still need one tempo with black to get this knight into play, and this pawn majority on the king's side is very important for the attack. First, we have the b file open, so we can always play move like rook b1 and keep an eye on this pawn. b7, rook d1 is also possible. So many open files for white pieces, and also big space advantage. I would say that it is very obvious that white has an advantage in this position. So after knight e5, the problem was not that there is bishop b3, but the problem was bishop h3, and obviously g takes h3, rook e5 is in black's favor. Knight df3 is possible. Knight f7 is not working, with the idea that if he takes, then I will take back the bishop and have just a pawn. But after knight f7, bishop g4, intermediate move, very, very important intermediate move, and this position looks very good for black. That's why after bishop h3, knight knight df3, rook a d8, queen c1, and bishop g4. I think the position is quite tough for both sides to play, and it's like yeah, I have the center, I have two knights, but my pieces are somehow disturbing each other. One knight c6, and then I will have problems to defend this knight, because I don't want to I don't want to allow bishop f3, g takes f3. Opposite colored bishop, I think black is doing very fine here. That's why knight e5 is not played. And after queen a6, b4 was played. So let's stop at this moment and realize what is the position about. If white manages to advance b5, then he would have great advantage. The knight on a7 would be completely cut off, the queen would have big problems, and the pawn advance of c4 and c5 would be nearly unstoppable. And the more advanced the pawns are, the more space we have for our pieces, which means that we can b5, c4, we can put our bishop to b2 and attack this e5 pawn, and just develop very nicely with queen c2 and rook d1. All right, so let's say I hope that it works here. Yeah, b4, a takes b4, c takes b4, and b5. This is the move which has to be played. As I mentioned already, allowing b5 is not good for black. And here actually white had an interesting choice to play knight e5, to take knight e5. And I say interesting because you always think of, if there is knight e5 on the board, then bishop h3 is automatic. But actually in this position, bishop h3 is a bad move. And why is that? Because after bishop b2, now we are able to protect the knight with the b2, and we have tempo on h3 bishop to take it, so the bishop has to go and lose the tempo. Then we have knight b3. We don't want to take on b5 and allow queen b5 because it doesn't give us anything. The b4 pawn would be weak, but instead we want to grab the weak squares. What b5 did is that the c5 square is very weak for now. If you allow, let's say you play queen d6 and knight c5, now if we look at the position optically, it's very, very nice for white. And also I think that it's huge advantage for white, because with such knights on the board, and we have to compare the knight on a7 and the knight on c5 is just it's just very bad for black. That's why I tried to analyze after bishop h3, bishop b2, bishop e6, knight b3 to take, instead of queen d6, to take on b3, queen b3 and queen e6. But once again, the end game with queen e6, rook takes e6 and a takes b5 is bad, because the pawn is lost and there is a pin on the a file. But if you take the queen with the pawn, that's also bad, because it gives up the fight for e5 square. Now we have great forepost on the e5. There is no f6, there is nothing that can kick this knight out. We can just go a5, and look at this knight once again. It's such a bad piece. The c4, c7 pawn is weak. We have open c file and great knight on e5. It's also a plus for white to have the bishop and not two knights, because it's important to have dark squared bishops in this position. Alright, so after 95, we know that bishop h3 is not good, and b takes a4 should be played. So that was kind of a test for black. If you go automatically the bishop h3, or you just take a look at the position and play b takes a4. With b takes a4, the position remains to be quite unclear and very double-edged, because now knight b5 is coming, and this bishop might be tiny bit misplaced. It blocks the a4 pawn, but it does not have any free space. And also you don't want to go bishop b2 to allow a3. So knight e5 was not that great move. After b5, logical is to go bishop b2, which was played in the game, knight c6 and knight e5. Knight c6 is kind of a must move, because it threatens to take on b4, knight e5, knight b4 and rook e3. Rook e3 is a very interesting move. It shows that white is not playing only for equality, but maybe he will try to find something on the king side. Because if Maxim wanted to make a draw, then he would take on b5, queen b5, rook a8, and the position is quite equal. Although I must say that I prefer a little bit, tiny little bit black's position, because I just think that his pieces are more powerful. But it's an illusion, because white can simply come out, trade the pieces, and it's going to be a draw. But rook e3 was played, and after rook e3, b takes a4, sacrificing this pawn, but going to the g file and reminding black that I have a bishop on b2, and if I have the rook on g3 as well, this diagonal might be very dangerous. That's why, for example, here, if you play careless move like c5, then queen f3 is very annoying. Now we want to take on f6, so king h7 should be played, and knight e4, opening this bishop on b2. It's quite unclear, because let's say if you take it, then I can take back, and you cannot take it back, because then there will be a very nice tactic taking this rook, king g7 and queen f6. This should be completely winning for white. We are not giving mate yet, but this would be very bad, because king e7 is there. But let's say after queen d6, there is rook e7, queen h6, rook king e8, queen h8, and king d7, queen a8, and this is how many pawns we have. Okay, just one pawn, but these pawns are going to be lost anyway. that is why after rook g3, Grichuk played a very strong move, rook ed8. And rook ed8 is that I'm pinning the queen, so the knight cannot move, but a very brave queen f3 is still there, because after rook d2, queen f6, and is winning for white. Queen f3, king h7 was played, knight dc4, knight c2, and this is the moment I completely fell in love, because when I saw this position I was like, oh my god, isn't it very bad for white? Because if you play rook c1 type of move, knight d4, bishop d4 and rook d4, this looks completely winning for black, as he has a passed pawn, and pay attention, it's an extra pawn. And then I could not finish my thought, right away came rook g7, boom, and I was like, oh yeah, that's why we had the rook on g3 to sacrifice it. Rook g7, the idea of rook g7 is that you have to take it back, and another amazing move, not knight g4 type of move, because knight g4 would be very bad, he can just take it, but we have to open up this diagonal, we need to open it up, and there is no mate. Let's say if I play knight d7, still bishop d7 is there, or I play something like knight g6, which is the third available move, just knight d4 is there. So that's why knight c6, to open this diagonal, control the d4 square, and control attack the d8 rook as well. Knight c6, knight d4, only move, because actually it's not only move, and this is a very critical moment. I would like to spend a bit more time in this position, because I think that it's important, and I of course prepared many games for you, but I really want to use my time and explain the complications in this line. And what I mean in this with this sentence is that knight d4 is not only move, and actually black had very tricky king h7. First of all, we have to cover that queen c6 is no good. We can just take on f6, king f8, queen h8, king e7, bishop f6, king d7, rook d1. And this is lost for black. It is quite forced. I don't think that it needs any comments, because it's just forced line. Thus, after knight c6, a move like king h7 is very super intriguing for me. You allow queen f6, you allow knight d8, which means that you give white lots of options. We have to realize that we are rook down. We have a full rook less. After king h7, let's try to take the rook first. Take the rook and take, and take the knight on f6, which is very bad. Because after rook g8, simple rook g8, all threats are covered, queen g7 is covered, queen h8 is covered, and what is left is that this knight is hanging on c4 and this rook is hanging on a1. If there was no problem with these two pieces, then of course white would be even winning. But in this position, of course, white is doing very bad, because black handled all threats, and now there is double attack and he will win the material. So after knight d8, rook d8, knight e3 is a super awesome move, which of course computer found it. Let me cover first rook d8, bishop f6, then simple rook g8, and now we cannot go knight e3, because knight a1 would lose the rook once again, and we would be without any hope in this position. But why knight e3 is so important? And what is the idea behind it? It's a very, very difficult move, I think, to find. And king h7, if knight d8 and rook d8 would happen, then Maxim would have to find this brilliant knight e3 move. And the idea behind it is that with knight e3, we are going out of attack, we are attacking the knight itself, and we are still keeping a threat on f6. So let's say if knight goes back to e8, we will just take the knight on c2 and the material is equal. And I would say that I like white's position because I love this bishop on the a1 h8 diagonal. So knight e8 is not an option. After knight e3, what about knight a1? Why cannot we take the rook? Because then after queen f6, rook g8 has to be played because there is a mate on g7. And why knight e3? Because now we have knight g4. An amazing move. We are threatening mate on h6. Bishop g4 is not an option because the queen is hanging on a6. And after knight g4, bishop c4 only move because then the queen is open, the h6 pawn is defended, but it doesn't help black because simple queen c3 back, and black cannot do anything against this knight f6 threat. Nothing can be done. It's amazing. We are full rook down, and knight f6 is such a bad threat that it's just +3 in this position. I love knight e3. I love this move because after knight e3 you see so many options for white, and you see the power that even we have only three pieces attacking the king. Actually we had two, just the bishop and the queen, and then the knight comes and it's over. Okay, so knight e3, it's just bishop f6 first because we cannot take the knight, the knight will just escape on f6. So bishop f6 first, very important, because now this guy is hanging and this guy is hanging as well. Rook d3 has to be played, f takes e3, queen b6, and we can go just queen g3, threatening to give a mate. Queen e3, rook e3, rook a4 with a very, very equal endgame. This will be probably draw very soon. But once again, knight e3 is such a brilliant move, You have to see this move, and this is just super. That's just super. Okay, king h7. And what if white takes on f6 first? Threatens queen g7. Then rook g8. And here only move which saves the game, it's the only move, is knight 4 e5. Once again, we need our pieces into the attack, otherwise we're materially down, we have bad position on queen side, and we don't have time to think of material. Let's say rook c1 would be just queen c4. We have to realize as well that here in this position after rook g8, many pieces are hanging. The knight is hanging, both knights are hanging, and the rook is hanging. We cannot save all of them. So we play knight 4 e5. And here it's amazing that now black is under pressure and there is only one move that saves the game, with sacrifices and with perpetual check. It's not that you can save this game just like this with positional play, but a lot of tactics are going on. After knight 4 e5, queen e2 is the only move, and I will explain why later. First, let's see knight a1, why it's so bad. Because we are threatening to take on f7. Now queen h6 is made, and as you can see, this is bad because of mate very soon, like this. And after knight f7, rook g6 has to be played, and after rook g6, queen e7. and you cannot do anything with so many threats. Knight g5 is a threat. This bishop is just a monster. Bishop f7 once again does not help. There is simply nothing. Let's say queen c6, then any knight move, knight d8 wins, knight h8 wins, knight g5 wins, everything wins. That is why after knight 4 e5, queen e2 is a very powerful move, super powerful move, and the idea behind this is that after knight f7, rook g6 and queen e7, we have the same position which we had, just there is a rook on a1 and the queen on e2, which is very important because now we have the same trick. Rook g2, king g2, bishop h3. I love it. I completely love it. Now white cannot do anything, because if you try to save your position, then after queen f2 it's still a draw with perpetual check. And if you go somewhere on g1, then rook g8 is coming, or even queen g4 and queen g2 is mate. And yeah, and this one is also bad because of queen f3, queen g2 mate. So bishop h3, king h3 has to be played, queen f3, king h4, queen f4, and this is just perpetual check. I completely fell in love with this position and with this type of complications when I was analyzing this game, because I was like, computer was saying that knight d4 is not the only move, and I thought that knight d4 is only move, and then he said that there is king h7, and then I was trying to explore more and more, and I was facing more and more brilliant tactics, and I completely was impressed with it. I hope that you enjoy it as well, and you enjoy it as much as I do, because the fact that you have to play here knight e3, you have to find this move, and you have to find here so many moves like rook g8, knight e4 and queen e2. This is brilliant. This is just brilliant defend. Just to see that okay, knight f7 is there, but I have same trick, rook g6 first, queen e7 and rook g2. It's important to play rook g6, because if directly rook g2, then we would not have any check on f3 and on f file. So first rook g6, queen e7 and rook g2. I love it. All right, let's get back to the game. Knight c6, knight d4 was played, also a good move, knight d4 and bishop c4. But now the situation is that we have materially equal position, and but still very complicated, because the king is open. Oh, sorry, we don't have materially equal position. We are just rook down. It's a rook down position, yeah. But white had here knight f5 check, king h7, which is quite logical, and another sacrifice, knight h6, just to give everything, open the position, and think that two pieces in attack are enough for perpetual check. Let's say king h6 would be very bad. It would be super bad, because after bishop f6, this is an amazing mating net. We have two pieces to the king, and all other pieces, queen and rook and everything, is on the other side of the board. It means that it cannot help black king very much. Let's say king rook g8 would be bad because of check, 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 and mate. And if g8 square would be free, then king g8 and queen h8 would be mate, just one move later. Thus, after king h6 and bishop f6, this is completely winning for white. Let's say queen d6 to avoid queen f4, but then queen f5 is there, queen g8 we want, queen g5 we want, and rook g8 would not help because of g4, and queen h5 is mate. Queen f6 has to be played, but of course this is lost for black. So after bishop c4, knight f5 would be good move, king h7, knight h6, and Grichuk had to find here rook g8, which is not the only move. There are lots of moves that are 0, 0, 0 on engine, but still, knight g8, rook a4, again, once again, perfect sacrifice all the time. Queen a4, we want to get this queen out of the 6th rank, because if we gave check, then after queen g6 we would have problems. So rook a4, queen a4, queen f5, king h6, queen f4, king h7, queen f5, king h6, queen f4, perpetual check. I am very proud, I'm super proud that this type of analysis and these lines you cannot find in any article. So I love it even more, this game. So after bishop c4, e5 was played, and after e5 it was actually a bad move. Not so difficult here to find knight h7, and on e6 to play f6. Knight f5 met with king h8, knight h6 just queen e6. So that's why after f6 e7 can be played, rook g8, knight f5, king h8 and knight h6, but we have to realize that we are still rook down, and after rook g7 now we don't have enough pieces to attack. Everything is blocked, the bishop is blocked on this diagonal, and knight is actually a very good defender when something is dangerous on the king's side or to the king, and we have two pieces which are defending the king, so we cannot do anything, and this is lost position. So after knight h7 it was winning for black. e5 was very bad move, but on e5 rook g8 was played and knight f5 check. Now ef was also possible, but king h7, queen e4, rook g6 slightly better for black anyways, and knight f5, king h7, knight e7, again, once again a perfect move, because we need a mating net to the king. And here rook a b8 was played. Instead knight e8 could be tried, knight g8, king g8, queen g4, king h7, queen e4, king h8, e6 and f6, rook c1 and a3. Still slightly better position for black. If I went too fast in this line, I would just try to get over it again. Knight g8 we have to take, and queen g4. Now it's possible also to go king h8, but after e6 and f6 it's much better to have this queen for black on e4 rather than on g file. That's why, because now rook e1, and yeah, it's not the same. For example, you go a3, I can go bishop c3, and this pawn can be slightly dangerous for black anyway. Let's say you go a2, then queen g6 or queen f4, even more annoying. Queen f4 to have to attack both pawns. Also queen g6 is there. It's really not easy for black here. That's why after queen g4, king h7 first to have queen e4, and we cannot go g6 because everything is hanging. This one is hanging, on c4 is also hanging, but queen e4, king h8, and now e6, f6 and rook c1. If not rook c1 and let's say we go queen g6, then this guy is lost on e6, and if we go rook e1 with the same idea, then we are not in time, because a3, bishop c3, there is bishop d3, and this is very annoying. That's why it's important to have the queen for black on e4 to have bishop d3 with a tempo, and queen f4 would not help because now king h7 and this diagonal is completely covered. Okay, let's go back to the game. Knight e7, rook ab8 was played, e takes f6, queen b7. And this is, if you look at this move with engine, you would think that, yeah, that's not the move you want to make. Also, it was possible to play queen a8, queen f5, king h8, knight g8, rook g8 and g3 with a very, very complicated position. I don't know what's going on. If you turn on engine, it will say zeros, but optically it's very dangerous, I would say, for both sides. That's why after e takes f6, Grichuk decided to go in a pawn down rook endgame, but he knew that it's a draw. Simplifications happened after queen b7, rook b7, knight g8, rook b2, rook a4, take, and this endgame. Yeah, maybe not the best outcome of the opening at what he had, but it's a draw and he knew it and he achieved it. Of course, it was a little suffer for him, but he held it without any problems. I am really sorry that I put so much time in this game, but I think that this game was the game of the round, even of the second classical day or the tie breaks, but with so many complications, so many tactics, I just loved it and I wanted you to enjoy the game as much as I did as well. I will quickly cover the other games and the important stuff, what happened in the other games, because very soon, in 10 minutes, you're gonna have fun and play against the gorgeous, the smartest Miss strategy, and she's gonna have a banter blitz and it's gonna be awesome. I completely love to be in her show and attend, because she explains everything very well. So look forward for this show, of course. Okay, so let's quickly go through the other games. This was the game of Maxim Rochstein against Vladimir Fedoseev. And here it was very, very nice tactic, nice mating net to the king in this game. Bishop d8, I would think that that's a key move of the game. This game is not lost, of course. White had to play here e3, bishop b6 and king h1, give up this pawn, but nobody takes it because e4 would be hanging. Let's say bishop e3 would lead to simplifications with queen c8. If king goes, then perpetual check is there, knight f8 and knight e4, a very important move, because bishop e4, it's just queen c4, king goes, and queen e4. This is even better for white because of two bishops. That's why king h7 should be played, queen e4 and queen f2. It's queen g1 is mate, but of course there is queen b1 save for white. After king h1, queen f2 is another try with the threat of bishop e3, but once again queen c8 is there, knight f8 and queen c1, bishop e3 and queen f1. Now if, let's say, c2 is on the board, then white goes e6 to open up this diagonal. Bishop e6 would not help because of queen f6, and here black has to make the perpetual, not perpetual, but he has to change the queens, because after queen f3 it would be good for white, but bishop g2, queen f6, bishop f6, the e4 pawn is lost and the game is very close to equal. So if e3 had to be played, but instead of e3, knight c4 was played. And I don't know, probably he missed this move. Very nice, e3. Queen e3 is met with bishop b6, a very nasty trick, because you cannot take this. The queen is hanging, and otherwise you're just losing the queen because of the pin. After e3, bishop d5 was played. This is an amazing piece sacrifice. but queen f2, king h1, queen f1, king h2, and a brilliant bishop g5 back, very brilliant. Bishop f4 is the mate. Bishop e6. Now white actually has two pieces, two extra pieces, but after king g7 they are so misplaced that white cannot give any check. White cannot get his pieces into the game, and there is a very bad threat. Bishop f4, e3 has to be played, bishop e3, knight e3, and queen a1. This is just lost for white. Two pieces for the queen is not enough compensation. I loved, once again to emphasize, I loved bishop d8 maneuver because we want bishop b6, and when the bishop is on d8, after knight c4, e3, bishop d5, you somehow forget that this bishop can get back to g5 and not to b6. Queen f2, king h1, queen f1, king h2, and bishop g5. Perfect game. And let's get to the other game. It was Levon Aronian against Daniel Dubov, and there were lots of ups and downs in this game. Either it was draw, either it was winning, or draw or winning. Everybody was discussing it with the table base, but of course when you're sitting over the board, you're trying to work on the variations, the ideas, then you're not interested what other people is saying or what table base is saying or what engine is saying, because it's you who has to make the move, it's you who has to find the win or a draw, and it's not so easy, not easy at all. First, Levon had lots of possibilities to go g4 in this position, earlier in the position. This is move 61, and he had, I don't know, 10 possibilities to go the g4 move, but he played here king e6. Afterwards he of course got another 5 chances to play g4, but I'd like to cover what is the idea of g4. The idea of g4 is just to fix this pawn and later on kick the bishop out of the diagonal to have king f8, king f5, and king g5. How we can do it? The bishop now cannot remove. Let's say bishop g6 would be bad because of rook d7 check. King cannot go to g6 anymore, and if you go to g8, king f6 is there. So black has to pay attention that these two squares, bishop h7 would be also very bad here, because after rook d7, king g6, not to allow anything, then rook c7, now it's Zugzwang, king bishop g8 has to be played, but after rook c6 the bishop is out of this diagonal and easily grabs the g5 pawn. So after g4 the idea is that you cannot touch this bishop, it has to be on this diagonal, so you have to move the king. Also you cannot go bishop g6 because you need the g6 square for the king. King f7, rook d7, king g6, and now we start to chase the bishop. Rook b7, bishop d, because there is no other square. Of course bishop c2 can be played, but it would be same because we would go rook b2, bishop d3, and we would transpose into this game rook b3, bishop c2, and rook c3 with same ideas. Let's see how it would go here. Bishop d3, bishop rook b3, bishop c2. Once again bishop e2 here would be bad because of check and king f5. Rook b3, bishop c2, rook b2, d3, and king d4. King d4 is the key of this position. Now the bishop has to leave this diagonal because there is no valid square for the bishop, and king e4. And again, Zugzwang, there is a huge threat of rook b6 and king f5, and bishop g2 also important check is not valid because the bishop is the rook is on second rank, and after g2 it would be over. So this would win very easily for black, but instead they were moving around and we got this type of position, and this is already after rook b2, which was very bad move. Daniel had forced to draw. He didn't find it. He played bishop d3, rook b6, and then he lost easily because this was the pawn endgame and it's winning. But on rook b2, he had king e5, and the idea is that he wants to come king f4, bishop f3, and take this pawn. That's why Levon was very, very careful to move this pawn forward. Rook f2, not to allow king f4, and king d4. And it is very bad position because king e3 is coming with tempo, and there is nothing white can do. King g7, just king d4. If you go, let's say, rook f6 or something, still king e3, and bishop f3 is coming to take this pawn. So it would be forced draw. But of course, in time trouble, after 90 moves, you cannot find it, and that's very tough. And the last game I prepared for you very, very quickly, I will try to cover. Fedoseev won the brilliant game we saw in the first classical one, and Maxim Rutstein had to win this game, and that's why he went here a very interesting bishop e5. You give up your bishop, dark squared bishop, and you're in time to get something, some kind of play on the e5 pawn. Is it true or it's not true? It's not clear, because white of course has some very good defensive chances to defend the e5 pawn. D takes e5, queen c7, queen d6 would be very slightly unpleasant endgame for white, because f5, e5, king f7, king e6 is coming, and this pawn would be a target. So after queen c7, bishop d2 was played, and I will quickly go to the important moment, knight c6, bishop c3, castle, f4, h5, e3, and g5. Once again, d6 would lead to equality, but because of the match situation, of course, Rutstein did not want to have an equal endgame. Instead, he went for g5 and king f2. fg5 was a very strong move because after knight e5, h4, d5 is there, c takes d, d5, e takes d5, and e2. And this endgame, this game actually is quite pleasant for white, just because rook f5 is the threat, and my king is super safe. So fg, h4 was another try, queen g4, and if you take on g3, take on we don't take on g3, but we play h4 instead, and this one would not help because queen e4. That's a trick, because you go back, then I take this one. And if you don't go back and play something like d6, then I take on e5, take on e5, give a check on a8, queen b8, and queen c6. Queen c7 is no help. First of all, he could of course do the perpetual, but you can just take, and rook f7. This is lost for black. King f2 was played, and after king f2 there were many things going on. They got this position, and here was decisive mistake of white. He should have played rook f3, c takes d4, check, take the rook, take the pawn, and queen d5. And computer is saying that this game, this endgame is quite drawish, but of course it's very tough to go for this endgame because black has a very strong d4 pawn, and this king is quite okay for now on a6, though after queen d5, queen b5, queen d7, perpetual check is a threat. But instead, queen f3 was played, and after queen f3, this is a mistake because cd, take, and rook g1, rook e8, of course, if we take the rook, then it's drawn endgame. b4, b5, very strong move. Rook g6, just king c7. It's important to go to c7 to cover the d6 square. c takes b5, d3, rook c6, and king d7. And rook d3, just rook e3 is there. King g2 would not help because d2 is still a threat. Rook e3 and d1 queen. Completely winning for black. And b5, after b5, c5 was played, but this is lost because king enters, and after king d5, rook g7 and d3, the king comes to c4 and c3, and in 2 or 3 moves Fedoseev resigned. Thank you very much for being with me, for bearing me for this hour. I was really enjoying to analyze the games, and of course I will be back after round 5 tie breaks, and I will cover all the World Championship cycle, and hopefully you're enjoying it, having fun. And now make sure that you're not going anywhere, but you're challenging Anna Miss Strategy, Anna Rudolph, and you're playing blitz games against her. I wish her good luck. Have fun, Miss Strategy, and see you all after 3 days. Have a good night. Bye bye.